Welcome to our session, Breaking Barriers, Building Bridges, Innovation in the Climate Adaptation Financial Services Market. My name is Thea Duur. I'm a Senior Product Manager at World Resources Institute's Data Lab. At WRI's Data Lab, we use advances in data and technology to help our community tackle three interconnected goals: improving human well-being, protecting nature, and tackling climate change together and at the same time. And we are also members of the Climate Smart Innovation Hub, as it aligns closely with our work on equity, finance, climate resilience, data and technology, and we'll speak a lot more about the hub later on. So to give a bit of context into our session today, the negative impacts of climate change, as we are witnessing more and more, are severe, but they do not impact everyone equally. And the impact is most significant for the financially underserved who are dependent on natural resources, as well as populations who live in specific geographies, such as urban settlements or coastal regions. In fact, 80% of the world's financially excluded are also the world's most climate vulnerable. And climate adaptation solutions can help ease these at-risk individuals and communities and help them anticipate, adapt, and recover from these physical and economic impacts of climate change. So new technologies such as digital finance and fintech products can be catalytic in reducing the cost, improving the usability, and also expanding the reach of such solutions into impacted communities. And today's session will elucidate the nexus of financial services and climate adaptation based on real products and services that are already operating in the market, while considering what else is needed to boost this cutting-edge space. Ali Schmidt-Fellner is the Vice President of Insights at the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth, which advances sustainable and equitable economic growth and financial inclusion around the world. Ali is also a co-lead, alongside Tyler, of the Climate Smart Product Innovation Hub. Matthew Egesa is the CEO and founder of Vua, a fintech company that seeks to provide affordable and reliable financial services to people who work in the blue economy, who have previously been underserved by formal financial institutions. We have James Ogata, who is the Engagement Director at Pusara Center for Behavioral Economics, working with organizations to apply behavioral science in pursuit of poverty alleviation. And finally, Tyler Ferdinand is a climate innovation strategist with BFA Global, an innovation firm that is focused on financial inclusion and climate resilience. So getting started with you, Ali, can you tell us a bit more about what are we really talking about when we say climate smart financial products? And why does the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth feel that we need more of them in this warming, boiling world?
Thank you, Thea. It is great to be here with you and our fellow panelists today. As you so well articulated, low-income communities are hit hardest by climate-related disasters and environmental stressors, and unfortunately, these are increasing in frequency and intensity, from hurricanes to floods to droughts and heat waves. And these communities need a variety of financial services, from credit to insurance to digital payments, to adapt and grow more resilient to climate change. And while many of us know this to be true, at the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth, we felt we were not seeing enough resources or attention, be it climate finance dollars, innovation, or knowledge sharing, focused on this nexus of financial services and climate resilience in a centralized and coordinated way. And so we co-launched the Climate Smart Product Innovation Hub in partnership with BFA Global and the CIFAR Alliance to bring together financial and climate experts, entrepreneurs who are dealing with these issues on the ground, product managers, and other important stakeholders to accelerate the development and deployment of climate smart financial products. So what do we mean when we say climate smart financial products? We mean tech-enabled banking and financial service solutions that serve climate vulnerable communities. They can range from microinsurance to loans for climate resilient crops to a number of other important innovations that you'll hear more on from our other panelists. And by crowding in learning and innovation around these products, we aim to increase financial resilience and in many cases, hopefully improve livelihood opportunities for those most impacted by climate change.
Thank you, Ali. Matthew, as someone who has founded a company that aims to build the resilience of vulnerable communities via financial service innovation, what made you want to start this company and create this service? And what do you see as the impact of these services?
Thank you, Tia. What made me and my co-founder found VUA is we needed to leverage technology to provide financial services to small-scale fishers and other blue economy players who are currently underserved by formal financial institutions. You know, marine wild capture fisheries has high and low seasons, each spanning about 6 months. This makes the fishers to have irregular income. And in the low seasons, they still have to meet their daily household needs and other emergency needs. They lack conventional requirements such as solid financial records and collateral needed to access formal financial products. So VUA is a fintech solution that facilitates and track payments, savings, stipend disbursements, and loans. We partner with off-takers to provide payments through a checkoff system, and it allows the small-scale fishers to automatically save during that payment transaction. Additionally, they have an option to send the savings, further savings anytime. And the savings are now available to the small-scale fishers as stipends to smooth their incomes during those low fishing seasons or during any emergency. VUA platform provides that transaction history and a credit profile for those small-scale fishers to enable them access credit, which is currently unavailable to them. In terms of impact, VUA platform helps those small-scale fishers to deal with the uncertainty and unpredictability of the seasons. It also helps them to diversify climate change risks by getting them into other livelihood activities, such as production of mangrove honey during that low fishing season. Additionally, it also helps small-scale fishers in dealing with the impacts of climate change, such as replacement of damaged gear and boats. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Matthew. You're doing a lot. It's a really impressive product that is clearly filling a gap in the market. Tyler, you know, we talked about one product addressing a segment of the world's most climate vulnerable, but how is the Climate Smart Innovation Hub trying to scale innovation in this space?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Taya. I'm really excited to be here. First of all, this is my first Financial Inclusion Week. I'm usually stuck in the climate space, and now starting to break into the financial services space, which is something that I wanted to talk about a little bit more and how we need more of that. But exactly right. I've worked with Matthew and I've worked with his co-founder Titus, and I think it's an amazing solution filling a gap. But there's a lot more to be done, right? So the Climate Smart Innovation Hub is just one working group under the Climate Innovations for Adaptation and Resilience Alliance. We're going to share a link with you about that so you can explore that a little bit more. But the Climate Smart Innovation Hub realizes that we needed to scale this space, but in order to do that, we first needed to really understand and have a better understanding how this space should evolve. So to do this, we first focused on bringing together leading thinkers, including you guys on this call. You are all also members of the hub, but also beyond. And this includes accelerators like the Catalyst Fund, in the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, financial service experts like CGAP, and also those that are dealing with climate impacts every day, like the International Rescue Committee. And these are just an example, a subset of some of the members that are part of the hub. So once we had some key thinkers and doers in the room, we realized that in order to scale, we need to have a better understanding of where we would be scaling from. In other words, we wanted to know the current state of play. And so in order to do that, we did some intensive market mapping. And this market mapping has come to be known as the Gallery of Products. And this is a platform that showcases products at this nexus of climate adaptation and financial services, but all over the globe. And the goal of this platform is to raise the visibility of these products, inspire other entrepreneurs through these products, and build awareness with climate and/or financial service investors. And I just wanted to make a big shout out to my team, who hopefully is in the audience, but this was really implemented and designed by Juliano Rodriguez Beltran and Monica Charletta, who were really key players in developing this really amazing product. It was also largely informed by our collaboration with CGAP, who has already been quite active in this space and has done some landscape mapping. So the products on this platform, which is essentially like designed like a marketplace, are characterized by fintech components, adaptation narratives, business models, the geographies they're located in, and also the type of sector that they're focused on. But that's just some of the key characteristics that we look at. And I really encourage you to check it out, and we'll share the link with you so you can do a little bit more of your own sleuthing. In addition to that, we are also currently doing a deep dive into what we're calling STAR teardown. So 7 products from around the globe that look more at the technical components, including the fintech that's leveraged, the step-by-step user journeys for these products, as well as the different revenue models. And just before getting a little bit more into the scaling component, I wanted to talk about like the direction of scaling. So as we've performed these mappings, some trends have emerged. I will say that the vast majority of the products that are out there right now at this nexus, are agricultural adaptation products, right? And these are by and large insurance products, although there are some savings products and some product marketplaces out there. There's less products in sectors like health, water, transport, housing, and others, despite the fact that these are also sectors that are very vulnerable to climate impacts. The other thing that I wanted to quickly mention was that most of these are in sub-Saharan Africa, but again, this is driven by the number of agricultural insurance products. But if you were to remove these from the data set, you would see that South Asia is also a leading region. And then another point that I wanted to quickly make is that in general, we also see gaps in how these products are addressing adaptation resilience. Most are focused on recovery, and again, this is the insurance angle, and less with coping. So actually products that are helping individuals or communities during climate events, right? Or opportunity seizing, so helping them to diversify livelihoods. And I like to use the example that I used to work on in the past with communities that are facing intensifying impacts that have pushed them out of certain crop production, and they need to diversify into new production systems. How do they actually do that? How do they have the types of financial services that allow them to actually make that leap? Another very important thing is we aren't seeing products tailored to specific vulnerable communities, for example, women in the elderly. And I'm looking at my colleague James here, because I think that he's going to talk a little bit about that later, or at least I hope. And it's important, given all of these gaps, to mention that this doesn't necessarily mean demand or need. There's probably more activity in the ag insurance space because agriculture is one of the most climate vulnerable sectors. And BFA, as part of the Climate Smart Innovation Hub, is hoping in the future to do more analysis on the gaps versus the existing climate vulnerabilities and demand for certain products to really ascertain where more investment is needed, where should we be scaling, right? So we brought together some of the key thinkers, we did our homework, and then wanted to actually begin to test this space with innovators. We've started to seed some of the innovation via regional boot camps. Thus far, we've worked with over 30 young entrepreneurs interested specifically in this nexus, located in Bogota, in Colombia, in Cape Town, in South Africa. And I learned a lot. I think our team learned a lot from those events, but there's just one major thing I wanted to point out, and that was that these two spaces are still very much operating in silos. So financial service providers don't know how to address climate, especially climate adaptation. And climate professionals don't really know what to do with fintech and financial services. So we need more interdisciplinary design spaces, which is why we hope to do more of these types of design sprint style events in the future. So just in summary, now we have the initial talent network, the baseline knowledge and guidance, and the beginning of these local innovation ecosystems. And I think with a little more energy and resources into these three areas, we think we have the recipe for scaling through the Climate Smart Product Innovation Hub. And just a little plug, because I feel like we have to say it since it's so trendy, but we are looking at how to leverage generative AI to do this quicker and better. Assisting entrepreneurs and existing financial service providers with integrating climate adaptation into new or existing products, as well as leveraging AI for our tools and knowledge products that come out of the hub.
Yeah, if you don't mention it, then someone will ask about it.
Definitely.
But to pick up on something that you mentioned earlier on gender and equity. So a question for you, James. It's apparent that climate smart financial products can help narrow the resource gaps necessary for adaptation, but how can we promote digital uptake and adoption of these tools? And what sort of considerations, including equity, do we need to take into account for the most vulnerable, including women?
Thank you, Chair, and good question. So I'll start my response by saying not too long ago, many, myself included, assumed that digital finance was going to significantly help close the gender gap in access to financial services at large. Instead, what we're seeing now is the growth in the number of women actually being excluded by digital finance. The gender gap is growing in DFS services. So I felt I needed to address this dynamic first before we speak about the role of digital finance and climate adaptation for women in particular. However, today I'm encouraged by ongoing conversations and initiatives, including from the Financial Week this week, about how we can close the gender gap as the community. So there's awareness of this, and there's a lot of momentum to create products and intervene in markets to ensure women's wider inclusion. Now, the uptake question of digital products that ought to support climate adaptation is a very good one, but it's also a very difficult one. So we've spoken about the suitability of products for women, or the lack of it in this case. This applies to other marginalized groups as well. A lot of these groups are classified as risky by human beings with their biases. But as you've seen from other sessions this week, is the same biases are being extended into algorithms as well. And when you look at non-credit use cases, there's suggestions of an absence by the private sector of a strong business case to figure out how to better serve these marginalized groups, women included. So what we as Busara have seen in the last few years of financial inclusion is the repetitive emergence of lack of product relevance as contributing to the uptake problem of digital financial services. So the challenge will lie in how and where we find the balance between customization of products and the ability to scale these products to people that actually need them. Different communities are exposed to very different kinds of climate shocks. They have very different norms that they default to in the response to these shocks. And we're still figuring out how to inform products that are as relevant as possible to very specific communities exposed to these shocks, but at the same time, grounding ourselves in the reality that financial service providers need to be able to see a scale to a path to sustainably scale these products into larger populations that need them. So when it comes to the most vulnerable and marginalized people in society facing these shocks, we have to be even more intentional about understanding the context and building around that. A few common factors emerged specifically in marginalized contexts. One, realistically speaking, digital financial services are sometimes not as convenient as informal mechanisms for borrowing, for savings, even for insurance, however each community would like to call it. So there's a lot of lack of trust in digital services, and particularly some infrastructural issues such as an insufficient cash in, cash out networks to support scaling of digital products. Another aspect that we see a lot is low digital financial and numeracy skills. and especially for women and other marginalized and rural communities often features. And these are often the people that are more exposed to climate shocks, especially in agriculture, as Tyler mentioned, as well as other sectors as well. So we often see a lack of infrastructure ranging from mobile phones ownership, especially for women, to even something like dignified housing for rural farmers that represent a very different starting point for how we think about impactful climate-related interventions. So we need a lot more data, we need more insights to really understand if digital products are relevant to the most marginalized, and if they aren't, have a candid reflection on what is in our power to address what people need to be able to cope with oncoming climate shocks. So that's how I'd put it for now, but I'm happy to share more insights as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It's so interesting to understand some of these challenges in more detail. But as you said at the start, there is starting to be more awareness and there is momentum right now. So Ali, a question to you is like, where do we go from here? And how can folks on this call leverage this momentum and contribute to this space?
Yeah, thanks, Taya. That is a great question, and there are so many answers I could offer, but I'll share 3 ideas building on some of the great insights that my fellow panelists raised. One, we need more, goes without saying, catalytic capital to seed and de-risk new and existing innovations for entrepreneurs solving these issues in their communities. While there is important momentum, particularly as Tyler mentioned around agricultural adaptation solutions, more is needed there. And also we need to fill gaps in the space around areas like ocean economies, tourism, transportation, responding to heat waves for urban populations. And of course, Tyler also mentioned more investments in coping and livelihood transitions rather than just recovery. We saw so many incredible ideas incubated from just a few days of innovation challenges in Cape Town and Bogota this year through the climathons Tyler mentioned, and we need to keep the momentum going in local communities around the world. Secondly, as James mentioned, we need to push the frontier of research and insights. There are some important knowledge gaps we have around product uptake, particularly for marginalized segments such as women. How do we better bridge supply and demand? And actually, on an even more fundamental level, we still need a more established common language just to talk about this space. Tyler mentioned there's this siloed kind of approach right now where there's financial service providers, there's environmental organizations, there's innovators, and there's still, in some cases, a disconnect on adaptation versus mitigation and the role of financial services. So from a more common shared starting point, we're better equipped to coordinate and measure success and impact over time. I think the Climate Smart Product Gallery offers a good starting point for that shared terminology. We do have a taxonomy in there, and other organizations are also helping to shape this space. Tyler mentioned CGAP, and also our partner DataKind has published a fantastic work, fantastic work mapping the landscape for products and data sets at the intersection of financial inclusion and climate change. And lastly, we need more folks investing and participating in spaces that bring previously siloed organizations and data sets together to problem solve in new ways. The CIFAR Alliance is a great example of a global cross-sector coalition that brings folks from financial inclusion, environmental organizations, funders, data scientists, and entrepreneurs looking to learn and innovate together. So the more perspectives we have at the table, the greater the impact we can have.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We are now open to questions from the audience. So please do pop your questions to the chat box below if you haven't done so already. We have a few questions in already. So I'll get started with a question for James. One of the headline results from the 2021 Findex report was that the gender gap in account access had shrunk from 9% to 6%. You mentioned gender gaps are growing. Could I ask you to add a bit more context or nuance to how you think about gender gaps and what metrics matter and for what uses?
Thank you to the audience member who answered that question, and Tia for sharing it. So I was specifically referring to usage of digital financial services rather than generic uptake of or usage of accounts. And so in particular, I'm thinking about the markets of Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, of which we've previously or recently done research on. So we have observed general growth, but then the gap between men and women seems to be growing, specifically in those markets. So, yeah.
Thanks so much. We have a question for Matthew. The major problem in coastal Kenya, as many other parts of the world where people depend on fisheries for their livelihoods, is overfishing. Do you have a sense if providing credits with help of your solutions will increase fishing efforts and worsen overfishing or unregulated fishing?
Thank you to the audience member also who asked the question, and also Tia for sharing it with us. For us as a VUA, we help reduce that rate of declining marine catch caused by overfishing, because we only deal with the value chain players such as the middlemen and traders. A big shout out to Kumbatia Seafood, who we partner with as the off-takers, who only deal with the fishermen who use sustainable fishing methods that are designed to only catch the big fish, such as the use of hooks for the tuna. And the credit that we've given so far is for the purchase of sustainable fishing gear. So those are the reels, which is expensive, the small scale fishes. So we are aiding them to only use sustainable fishing methods, and that will help reduce the overfishing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We
Taya,
have so yes.
Can I jump in on that just for a second? Because I just wanted to build on what Matthew just said, and it just made me think of a conversation I had yesterday, and also relates to the title of the Climate Smart Innovation Hub. And the conversation I had about yesterday was about there's a lot of incubators and accelerators out there that are looking for quantity in terms of the number of startups that they have under their umbrella, right? But it's really important, I think, to focus on the quality of those entrepreneurs and the companies that they're working on, with the types of considerations that, for example, Matthew and Titus are making, that it's not just the adaptation component, it's also the sustainable resource component, and it's also the mitigation component, right? And so although the Climate Smart Innovation Hub is focusing on the climate adaptation and resilience angle, because historically it's been sidelined, we're really talking about products that hit all three of those marks, right? So adaptation, mitigation, and sustainable resource use.
Continuing with you, Tyler, I do have a question from the audience for you about BFA and whether BFA is trying to redirect the trillions of mitigation resources toward adaptation. If so, how is it going? And this is from Peter Gross.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. And I think that's a great question, because I think many on the call will know that adaptation climate finance is just a fraction of mitigation climate finance, right? And we're seeing more and more in the media about how, and you mentioned at the beginning, Taya, it's a warming world. It's not a warming world anymore, it's a boiling world, right? And so we need adaptation more than ever. Mitigation, we still need. I don't think that we're trying to redirect mitigation finance, but rather look at solutions that are still mitigating emissions, but with adaptation outcomes, right? So it's actually leveraging all of the momentum behind mitigation finance for adaptation and resilience. And under the Climate Innovations for Adaptation and Resilience Alliance, the CIFAR Alliance I mentioned previously, in addition to the Climate Smart Innovation Hub, we have another working group that's focused on carbon finance. And that is the exact narrative that we're using, right? There's also a lot of contention in the carbon finance space. But what we're really interested in is how do we actually leverage all of that attention, all those resources for adaptation outcomes. So it's not necessarily taking away from mitigation finance, but actually thinking more critically about the outcomes of that finance.
Thanks so much. And I think this links well to our next question for Matthew. That is, on what is the business case really around the products that focus on adaptation and resilience?
Oh, Matthew, you're still on mute.
For the business case, quite a bit. Thank you. Thank you, Taylor, for that. For the business case, especially for the risk mitigation, and like for us, we are doing much of the diversification of their livelihoods, especially the small scale fishers that we are working with during the low fishing season when it is quite unpredictable and all that. So quite a bit of the smoothing their incomes during that time and enabling the fishermen also diversify their livelihoods into other economic activities such as production of mangrove, honey, and other bits. It's one of the business case for them, and also mitigating the risks that are there. Let's say adverse effects of climate change, the damaging of their boats and the damaging of their fishing gear. So quite a bit of that could be a strong business case for this.
Thank you so much. I think the next question could be for everyone here. It's on the hub. So the question is, we are a social lender supporting the missing middle agri SMEs. Is the hub somewhere we can learn and share from others' experiences on climate adaptation, or is the hub aimed at institutional government finance streams? Ali, would you like to get us started on responding to that?
You know, I will take the opportunity to pass that to Tyler, because Tyler has some knowledge of both the hub and some other CoLabs across the CIFAR Alliance that's focused specifically on agriculture. So Tyler, would you mind if I pass that one to you?
Yeah, sure. And you kind of answered the question in that pass a little bit. But there's maybe two things I would share. One, that the Climate Smart Innovation Hub itself is not necessarily focused on institutional or government finance streams. We're a quite eclectic group. And I think actually we're more, I think our membership is more of like the innovators, product developers, alliances and of incubators and different types of product innovators. So it's actually not so heavy on the institutional and government finance piece. So you're more than welcome to reach out and we can chat. But as Ali had mentioned, there's also another CoLab under the CIFAR Alliance that's called, I'm just remembering the acronym now, CRAG, Climate Resilience Ag, Climate Resilient Ag CoLab. And they're focused specifically on climate smart or climate resilient agriculture. And so I think they would also be keen to speak with you. So you kind of have a couple of options there.
Fantastic. We have so many interesting questions in the chat. I'm so happy to read them and pass them over to you guys. So this is to all panelists. Given that climate affected individuals are increasingly vulnerable to predatory practices, do you see new or heightened consumer protection risks in climate smart financial products? James, could you get us started on that?
Yes, of course. So very good question. So it makes me think about some of the use cases that we see already, even before the conversation started about climate smart products, is the use of services, in particular credit, for climate adaptation. So for example, reinforcing homes in anticipation of flooding, or replacing homes and refortifying homes after the event of flooding. And these are financial services that have been used by people to help them adapt to these risks. So the thing about the interaction of finance and climate is that these decisions are made in very desperate states. And it creates a scenario where some financial service providers can take advantage. And for example, enact very usurious interest rates with APRs in the thousands of percentages because they know that people are lacking in alternatives and lacking in choice. So as a result, the answer is yes. Consumer protection and regulators need to keep tabs on innovations happening in this space, but also at the same time, allowing for innovation that doesn't throttle responsible and value-adding finance to communities that need these financial services. So it is a difficult question because also regulators often aren't able to keep pace with regulation with these services. So there's a number of initiatives such as like small hubs for sandboxing where regulators can understand the products before they're fully deployed in the markets to see if there's any unintended consequences of the usage of the products in the short term and long term. But regulators, especially in emerging markets, they do need support in terms of technical assistance and other similar provisions to enable them to regulate the market, but also support the market, because that's also a dual function that they have, is to reduce extreme cases of exploitation of consumers, but also at the same time ensuring that responsible and value-adding financial services flourish for the benefit of the people that they serve. So great question, but the answer is yes. The same regulation issues that we're seeing already today in the DFS space will extend to emerging spaces in climate and finance. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to pick up something you mentioned on technical assistance side as well, there is one question from the audience that links to that. So this is aimed at Matthew. Matthew, do your solutions also provide links to non-financial support, such as business literacy trainings? Oftentimes coastal communities, especially fishers, have day-to-day business models, and it's quite a revolution to forecast business at a much longer time scale with related risks involved. And I guess it's just emphasizes, the question emphasizes the need for not just financial products and services, but also these complementary capacity building and trainings that need to sit hand in hand. Matthew, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks. It's our call to action because we are alive to the fact that lots of literacy or financial literacy and business literacy trainings needs to be done, and the level of the fishers, especially the small scale fishers, just even the basic literacy is quite on the low. And given the context, we've been reaching out. And even this is a call to action for partners to come on board to help in the business literacy, financial literacy, and also behavioral change. Because even the saving culture is not currently during the bumper harvest, the 6 months, they really get a lot of cash. But during the 6 other months for the low season, they have nothing to spend. And they're like, it's really bad for them. So just behavioral culture, behavioral change, and thanks for James who's on the call and the behavioral work that they do. So we're reaching out to even other partners to help with the business literacy and infusing it within the product because we are live to that part. Thanks.
Amazing, thank you. Next question. I would aim it to you, Tyler. So there is a comment saying you highlight the importance of quality of products and fulfilling the end goal of climate adaptation and sustainability. But how is the Climate Smart Innovation Hub measuring this? I'm interested in the impact, results indicators, and methodology.
That's the question, eh? And I have to say I've been wrestling with the issue of metrics and measurement in the climate adaptation resilience space for over a decade. And I think what people keep on realizing is that it's very context specific, right? And I'm sure people aren't really satisfied with that answer, but that's the truth. However, I have a little bit more of a concrete answer, and I'm going to kick that over to my metrics and measurement CoLab at the CIFAR Alliance. So we're very conscious of the fact that if we're going to be having a Climate Innovations for Adaptation Resilience Alliance, we need to be smart about how we're actually measuring that those outcomes or that impact. And so right now we do have that CoLab that's actively bringing together all the different taxonomies that are out there, all the different empirically tested methodologies. We now have a resource library actually that I think compiles a handful of those on the CIFAR Alliance website to make sure that we're trying to benefit from some type of consistency and alignment from what's already out there, but also pushing, I would say, the innovation piece of metrics and measurement. So for example, I had the pleasure of being a project lead with one of our venture launching companies that was focused on the blue economy, that's focused especially on this piece. How do you actually monetize MRV, monitoring, reporting, and validation, but from the community side, right? So how are you actually upskilling community members, compensating them for the data that they're providing, and actually having that as a functional business model? So therefore, those metrics are working for those communities, but also they're benefiting from collecting those metrics. And so we're actively playing around with that space. I think that I would also just steal something that I saw earlier on today from a colleague of mine that I admire, is that there's a lot about like transforming the climate adaptation space, and it's all about big. But I think really what it's about is focusing on the little things as well, right? In adaptation, so much of what matters is the details. And we need to get better at measuring those and collecting those types of stories.
Fantastic. Ali, I would pass it to you to for a quick question or clarification. So there is a question to please repeat the name of the data partner that you spoke about earlier and the maps you mentioned, and if there's any other kind of key resources that you think would be interesting for the audience.
Of course. So we have at the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth a great partner called DataKind, and DataKind helps with capacity building for data science in the civil sector. And they've recently published a fantastic landscape report on inclusive climate finance. And it digs into the intersection of climate finance, financial inclusion, identifying data gaps, and offering data-driven solutions to tackle climate change. So I've passed that link along, and perhaps our colleagues at Financial Inclusion Week can circulate it with the audience members. And then, you know, another great resource that was fundamental for the foundation of our Climate Smart Products Innovation Hub was this landscape report by CGAP, the State of Climate Responsive Financial Products, and that landscape. And so I'd highly recommend that as a starting point for folks who are just getting their feet wet in the space.
Fantastic. And before we close, I have one final question to you, Tyler. How do people get involved with the Climate Smart Innovation Hub?
That's the perfect question, Thea. So we actually hold monthly meetings, and this is a really exciting time to get involved with the hub, because the next meeting, which is actually going to be next week, and I've shared my email so that if people want to reach out to me and join in on that call, is going to be talking about the future of the hub. So we really encourage you to join. I've already shared with Abby, who's been sharing everything in the chats, the link to the actual page for the Climate Smart Innovation Hub, which also contains the gallery of products, as well as the CIFAR Alliance LinkedIn page, which has kind of become our online community. The other thing that I would just quickly mention is that we are going to be at Latin American Climate Week in Panama City, which is next week, as well as COP28. So if you happen to find yourself at either of those events, any of the members would be very happy to chat with you. And we're very eager to collaborate and see how we can scale this space together.
Thank you, Tyler. And thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to the organizers of Financial Inclusion Week. Thank you to audience members joining us on this live stream. And please stay tuned with our activities and keep an eye on the resources and the website Tyler just shared. Have a lovely day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.